Greetings, system failure listeners. Nate here, Brian over there as usual. Brian, how are we doing this week?
I'm doing all right, Nate. How are you?
Pretty good. We are recording from a much different location than usual. We're here at my house and not whereas we usually record in Brian's studio. Part of the reason for that is that we just got done watching some Olympic hockey. We invited our dad down. In fact, we thought we were going to have our dad on the podcast as a special guest today, but the man himself is flying to Florida and had to make good his escape. So maybe we'll have to do that some other time. That would be a very interesting interview for the old system failure audience, Brian?
Yeah, well, instead of a view of like the alleyway and the Trelawney, the Ratchet apartment building across the street, we've got a view of your snowy backyard here.
Yes, and I do believe that we will not be interrupted by sirens and other emergency noises this time. Usually it's about once a podcast, the Bram Hall Station fire engines rev up their sirens to the max and go tearing through the streets of Portland, and that's when you and I have to pause talking and wait a few minutes for the sirens to pass, and then begin our sentence again at the top, and then Brian edits it all together so that you all, the good folks listening out there in podcast land, never have to hear the sirens, hopefully. But today I'm in a much more rural location than Brian, who's at the heart of downtown Portland. So hopefully we can avoid having any interruptions today. That'll be awesome, eh, Brian?
Indeed.
Now, we did, as mentioned, have our dad over to watch the Olympic gold medal game, which started at 8 o'clock in the morning, East Coast time. But it was interesting to see the U.S. face off against the Canadian lads for the gold medal. Obviously, the Canadian national team is like stacked. It's like a ultra NHL All-Star roster. It is just stacked top to bottom with massive names in hockey. The names like Sidney Crosby and Connor McDavid. And so this was definitely a David versus Goliath scenario. And spoiler alert, U.S. managed to win in overtime and bring home the gold, just like the American women winning the gold over the Canadian women. So this will be great. Maybe the Donald will send some entertaining tweets to the Prime Minister Carney and invite him to become Governor Carney, of the 51st state or some other horrific thing like that, Brian?
Yeah, well, the game started at 8:10 a.m. East Coast time, and so we got to take advantage of living on the East Coast as opposed to like maybe if we lived on the West Coast. The hockey game in the playoffs start at like 8:30 normally, which is extremely irritating. And when the game inevitably goes to overtime, you're going to be up to all hours, especially if we've driven out maybe to our dad's out there in Oxford, like an hour away, and you're just thinking about how late you're going to be up. And it's just another crummy commercial. It's absolutely brutal. And then, I guess I really haven't gotten to watch any Olympics other than, I guess, YouTube clips of like, extreme skiing and snowboarding that pop up, which is pretty cool. But yeah, the Olympic hockey format, well, really it is a dream come true. It's that single elimination bracket like you have in football. And so it's just crazily intense.
Every game's a game 7 once you get out the qualifying round.
Yeah, it's a little hard to get worked up for like the first period when it's 8 o'clock in the morning. But it started to set in, I think, about halfway through the second. And that was like a crazily dramatic hockey game. And who got the game winner for the Americans there?
Jack Hughes of the New Jersey Devils, one of the 3 Hughes brothers, who was the hero today.
After getting his teeth knocked out by Sam Bennett. So he had a crazily jagged set of teeth there.
Yeah.
So that was like crazily exciting.
Yeah, his whole grill was a mess, after taking that high stick. So that was great. And I echo your sentiment about the beneficial start times. Fellow podcaster and notorious comedian Bill Burr is always talking. He's like a Boston guy, but he's lived in L.A. since like the late '90s or something like this. And he's always going on his podcast and talking about how great it is that he gets to start the Bruin games at 4 p.m., whereas they start at 7 o'clock for us here local time. But you're right, Brian. The real payoff is the playoffs, where I have been guilty of losing my good cheer because you have dinner, and it's like you got to wait 2 hours for the face-off is in the later rounds of the NHL playoffs. And it's like 8:15, 8:20, 8:25, and they're dinking around and not dropping the puck and rolling the Sky Rizzy commercials. And you're like, yeah, I got to drive home for an hour after this game. It's just like, it really is like, doesn't the NHL realize that we all have to wake up early and go to work in order to buy their horrifically overpriced tickets and merch? Like, we've got, like, please make this friendly for people who have work every day is my perennial complaint about the NHL playoffs, but not so this morning. We got to wake up at 8:00 and start the game. It's like in the soccer tournaments, the football, in Europe, all like the Premier League. If you follow those, they're always on early on Sunday morning, or the NFL football games in Munich or London or some other location in Europe. So that was really cool. And then the other aspect of this is there really is like a lot of unlike the Stanley Cup playoffs, the Olympics have this geopolitical importance. I'm thinking now of Soviet and American tanks facing each other at Checkpoint Charlie in Berlin during the darkest days of the Cold War, and this being the backdrop to the 1980 showdown between the fearsome Soviet men's hockey team and the ragtag bunch of college students from Boston, Minneapolis, the amateurs that had to play against them in 1980 in Lake Placid and managed to win. And then there's also the incident you remember in 2014, Brian, in Sochi in the Crimea, when the Olympics were there. This is literally weeks before Putin annexed the Crimea, which was a part of the Ukraine. And then in 2014, Putin, took the Sochi. Because Russia needs a warm water port. They have no other warm water port other than the Black Sea, the Crimea. But Putin was in the building, as you may recall, Brian, and they had the Russians in the Olympic format when it goes to the shootout. I guess they since have gotten rid of the shootout and just gone to 3-on-3, which is what we just watched. But they had a shootout then, and you're allowed to send the same player up for multiple shots in a row. And so it was American TJ Oshie, who were just retired this past year, against Ilya Kovalchuk, the best of the Russian players at the time. And they just had round after round of the shootout, to decide. It wasn't like a medal game. It was like it was earlier than that. But like Putin was he very much wanted the Russians to make a statement on the world stage by winning a gold medal. And I think ultimately the TJ Oshie beat them, right? Isn't that how it ended?
Yeah, after several rounds.
Yeah, and Putin was most displeased. So there is like a geopolitics, and of course the geopolitical stage this time around is that the Donald. I remember last year's Four Nations tournament, which was the same guys, U.S. versus Canada, and there were the three fights in the first, like couple seconds of the game, and this was all taking place against a backdrop of where the Donald had referred to Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau. Then it was Trudeau. Now it's Mark Carney, but he had referred to him as Governor Trudeau as a way to be super insulting. And so tensions were very high between the U.S. and Canada for the Four Nations tournament last year. And that has definitely bled into this Olympic event. So it was really cool to see Team USA, the underdogs, win, and then they played the Freebird. We played Leonard Skinner for the, in the moments after the U.S. had won in overtime. So it was a very, rah, rah, go America moment. That was fun.
It was a pretty good show. Yep.
Yeah. Now, moving on from international geopolitics and sports, Brian, I guess it is very sunny today, but we are looking at a massive snowstorm coming up the East Coast. It's one of these nor'easters, which means the winds blow out of the northeast. And this is the kind of storm that often blows to our south because of those northeasterlies. But it looks like the storm is tracking more and more north to really envelop the state of Maine. Meanwhile, down in New York City, they're predicting the worst blizzard in 10 years. This is their first actual blizzard warning since 2017. So down in Boston and New York, things are going to get very hairy tomorrow when, Brian, you're supposed to drive the lovely Tracy and myself down to Boston so we can hop a flight out to Serbia. I got no idea what's going to happen tomorrow. It's going to be an adventure. I feel that there's at least a coin flip chance that yours truly and the lovely Tracy are going to end up camping out on the floor of Boston's Logan Airport Terminal E, the international terminal, tomorrow night, waiting for these flights to take off. We're talking about 50-mile-an-hour winds and whiteout conditions, so not really sure what's going to happen with that, but traveling is always an adventure, and it sure looks like tomorrow is going to be no exception to that rule.
Yeah, we'll have to see what the situation is. Like, if it's the sort of situation where you have to drive like 35 miles an hour on the highway, Well, that'll cause problems because that's going to mean it's like a 5-hour trip down to Boston.
Well, if that's what it looks like, then Trace and I will merely Uber over to take the Concord Trailways bus from the Portland station down to Boston tomorrow. Yeah. So we won't put you through the ringer if it's too crazy out there, Brian.
Well, I hope that that's not the case, and I do get to drive you down, and then I can see, the Massachusetts plow force at work.
No, I don't. Have we covered this on the podcast that one of your longtime obsessions is, plow trucks and Zambonis?
I think maybe it's come up. Yeah. I'm not sure when the last time we talked about it was. But I think what they do in Massachusetts is that, they contract the general public to plow the highways. And so what you see is a plow strapped to like any and everything. And they line them up so they're kind of, like in a flying V sort of situation, or at least half of a flying V.
They're like bladed, or staggered on the highway.
Yeah.
So one plow pushes the snow into another plow's path, and but eventually it all pushes off to the side of the road.
Right. Yeah. And so, if you're a connoisseur of plowing, it's there's really nothing more better than like driving on the Massachusetts highways in a snowstorm. So hopefully that happens.
All right. Well, I sincerely appreciate your willingness to be our chauffeur tomorrow, despite all the craziness, Brian. That is, very, very nice of you to offer.
Well, one thing is I got the new vehicle, the Ford Maverick there, the Tremor Edition, of course, as we talked about on the last podcast, or maybe the one before. But
are you eager to try out its capabilities in the snow?
Yeah, well, I drove down to this Magic the Gathering tournament yesterday, and it was like a little snowy because there had been a snowstorm like overnight, and I got to test it out a bit, and it does seem to handle pretty well.
All right.
I guess I like it the more that I drive it. So. Yeah.
Is it starting to grow on you so that you prefer it to your old Volkswagen Tiguan?
Yeah, definitely. I think overall it just kind of handles better. And let's see. The one thing about the Tiguan is, I don't know, the brakes just on it like weren't that tight or something. Like you kind of press the brakes, and its ability to slow down was questionable.
Well, you could like bleed the brakes and fix that. I feel like you could just add more water or add more brake fluid to the hydraulic system that controls your brakes. But what year was your Tiguan? Do you recall?
16.
16. Oh, that's pretty new, huh?
Well, there's probably. I'm sure you're probably right. I guess, but I don't know. In general, the Tiguan handled quite a bit better than the Toyota Solara, which is basically a glorified Camry that I had before that. And then the Ford Maverick, it does handle, I would say, definitely better than the Tiguan there.
Right.
So,
well, moving up in the world, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Excuse me. As mentioned, with me heading out of town, this will be our last live podcast for a couple of weeks. It's not that it's not going to be live, but it's just we and I are going to have to remote in to the same Discord chat room and record the podcast that way. So this is the last time we'll be face to face for a couple of weeks, which is interesting. So the next time you all hear our voices, we will be remote. I wonder how much of a difference that will make. Probably, hopefully, I guess the goal should be to make it not much of a difference at all, to make it as similar to the regular podcast experience as possible.
Well, I shall endeavor to try to make the audio not deviate too much from what's normal. We'll just have to play with it a bit. We might just want to do like a minor dry run.
Sure, yeah, of course. We'll definitely have to do a dry run to make sure that everything is firing on all cylinders. All right, well, that'll be very interesting. I'll be excited to jump on and give everyone an update from the dark heart of Serbia there.
I mean, it is an exciting opportunity to communicate over Discord, which we had talked about before in the podcast. But I think you'll find that it's like better than a regular phone call trying to talk over the Discord. It's like much higher fidelity. Yeah.
Well, I do recall that 2 years ago in 2023, you and I recorded this podcast when I was on the road, driving down in Florida. Do you remember that? And it was just a phone call, like you're saying. It was the audio quality was not only, it was bad enough that it was a cell phone call, but then I also had to Bluetooth because I was driving, down the road. So I had to also Bluetooth into the phone. So there was like the Bluetooth to the phone. So you're dealing with a crappy, the microphone that's mounted above your in the header of your car. I'm dealing with that, and then we're dealing with the cell phone. It was just a terrible quality. So it is my hope that this time around my traveling will not cause awful audio quality on the podcast. I think the Discord chat room that you thought up, Brian, is just the way forward on that front.
Yes, well, I'm sure it'll be a step forward this time in any case.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess that's all the personal news that's fit to print, Brian. What say we turn our attention to what's going on in the world today?
Sure.
All right. Well, man, this article popped up on Thursday on Wall Street Journal, and I thought it was interesting. But the headline here is Trump orders release of UFO government files, and the subheadline is President's decision follows Obama's podcast comments about aliens. So I think this is one where I don't really have to read any of the article. The headline is the news here. But I don't know, Brian. It is interesting. Obviously, I forgot the name of the podcast that President Obama was on. It's one of these corporate podcasts.
It's some kid that they're trying to tout as like the Democratic Joe Rogan, but the problem is that no one actually listens to him. Or at least I don't. Maybe some people do.
Yeah, I can't imagine listening to these like DNC sponsored podcasts. In the 2024 election, you had like the Donald making the rounds going on, like Andrew Schultz's podcast and the JRE, the real popular ones. But then Kamala Harris was just maybe someone who they weren't. Her handlers were maybe not confident that she could actually make it through a 3-hour interview. Right? Now, I think it's because she's putting on a facade, right? She has like the politician. She's acting as a politician. And she, there's the move where if sometimes like a Hillary Clinton will go to like Minnesota and drop the G's, say like going instead of going, trying to sound more colloquial. So there is a bit of an act that you put on, except for the Donald doesn't really put on an act. He just rambles and barely coherently, but it's always the same, sort of flavor that Donald has for us. So I just feel like maybe Kamala maybe her handlers weren't confident that she could accomplish that. And so they sent her to some friendly podcasts, like Call Me Daddy or something. Yeah, to these just like milquetoast podcasts. But they didn't have Kamala go on the major shows like the JRE with tens of millions of listeners for every single episode. And maybe that cost them the election. You could really see that just way more people are today getting their news from Twitter and podcasts than they are from the old CNNs and other such legacy dinosaurs.
Yeah, well, the thing about Kamala is that she wasn't able to go out there and say that, obviously, like Biden is like decrepit. She has to try to toe the line that Biden was sharp as a tack, and she's just been put in there as kind of, some other reason or something. And obviously they would have to address that like on the Joe Rogan podcast.
Right. You've been saying that Joe Rogan's sharp as a tack and that you can barely keep up with him behind the scenes, but we could all see that the man was in an advanced state of decrepitude. And so now, you would like. So what were you lying to us? Like, what's up? So, but now Joe Biden can't possibly run. So we've got you instead. But 3 months ago you were saying Joe Biden sharp as a tack. Yeah, it's just one of those. It's the reason why no one watches these mainstream media, the corporate media anymore. So
to start to point the ship towards the headlines, or the UFO headline. Mm-hmm. But before we get to there, I have to say that there's some question. I was discussing this yesterday with my friend Jonathan. But I think that some people who are shocked and horrified by Donald Trump and like the ICE raids and whatnot, they maybe think that people like me who voted for the Donald are gonna like regret voting for the Donald over Kamala, which I just I definitely don't regret voting for Donald Trump. I think that Kamala would be worse. It is what it is. Like the nature of the discourse, like we'd have to. The Biden sharp as attack discourse would have prevailed, and you'd have to think about how bad of a situation that would be, and then we wouldn't even be pursuing like the Epstein like documents, right? Yeah. And so I think that where we are is like where we're supposed to be, and this is kind of the way that things should be going if we want to someday defeat our reptilian overlords, basically. So, no, I don't regret voting for Donald Trump over Kamala Harris. Yes, I do think the dude is obviously I don't like support Donald Trump, but I don't know. I don't know if that calculus makes sense. The Trump derangement syndrome, where it kind of makes people, I don't know, that causes like an emotional reaction to say that I still stand by voting for Donald Trump. But that doesn't really mean I endorse Donald Trump. And people like can't wrap their head around this with like Dave Smith or like Joe Rogan. Like, they can't understand I don't know, like the broader, what you got to understand about people like me who voted for Donald Trump is that I could have just as easily voted for Bernie Sanders, right? I just wasn't like given the opportunity. And I like most of the people who voted for Donald Trump, I would say are that way. Like I don't know anyone in real life who's actually one of these MAGA diehards who, I don't know, thinks that Donald Trump is basically Jesus. Like, I mean, those aren't really, that's like on the internet only, right? Like, I don't know a single person in real life who's like that.
They must be out there. But yeah, to echo your point there, yeah, I more or less agree with your analysis with the added proviso that the Donald administration deserves zero credit for this Epstein business. They did everything they could to sandbag it just like prior Democratic administrations could, but the Donald supporters were like, are not going to let this go.
Well, the thing is,
campaigned on it.
Well, yeah, he campaigned on it, so he acknowledged it up front, and now he's being hoisted by his own petard. So the thing that like is crazy about Donald Trump is that like ostensibly he's like not trying to win the midterms, and I guess his plan was to go in there and just kind of loot and pillage as much as possible in the time available to him. I don't know. Well, I don't know. It's crazy how releasing some of the Epstein documents, I guess they thought this would like quell people's appetite instead of just making them more hungry. But in any case, so what we got to understand about the UFO disclosure is this idea of like Project Blue Beam, which is like an idea that's been around in conspiracy circles. Like if you go to like our conspiracy on Reddit, there's been bazillions of posts about it over the years. And Project Blue Beam, it's the idea that the government's going to stage a fake alien invasion.
I want to see what Wikipedia says about Blue Beam. It's Blue Beam and not Blue Book, right?
Pretty sure it's Blue Beam.
Serge Monast was a Canadian conspiracy theorist. He is mostly known for his promotion of the Project Blue Beam conspiracy theory, which posits a plot to facilitate a totalitarian world government by destroying Abrahamic religions and replacing them with a New Age belief system using futuristic NASA technology and involving a fake alien invasion or fake extraterrestrial encounter meant to deceive nations into uniting under a new world government. But that doesn't seem like that's not exactly a confirm that that's what it was.
Well, what it is they're gonna it's a directionally adjacent idea. Yes. Like the government's just gonna like the amount of UFO stuff that comes out is gonna be mostly nonsense, even though there is truth about this out there somewhere.
So you're thinking that the Donald's announcement here may be a distraction away from Epstein files or a distraction away from the woeful state of the collapsing capitalist economy, and that this is all a dog and pony show so that maybe we can shift public attention, like the Toreador, the Matador with the red cape, right? It's a way to distract attention of the public's attention away from something else, like
well, the plebs have organized their focus on this Epstein files business, and so as an attack on the Tower of Babel, they need to introduce another confound to get the plebs to infight amongst each other. And so it's crazy. Now we're getting to the end of the playbook. I think I made this prediction some time ago, but you'll know that they're at their end when the UFO stuff starts happening. That's the last play in the playbook.
It's really there is a massive pile of indirect evidence, I guess. There's just so many documented UFO encounters and people claiming to have seen or read classified documents about the government being in possession of alien technology. Obviously, there's the lights in the sky. There's the fact that aeronautics is always a couple decades ahead of wherever they publicly acknowledge being. There's the fact that the U.S. government has knowingly introduced misinformation or disinformation or allowed conspiracy theories to fester as a way of covering up some of this advanced aerospace technology. And then the possibility that there might actually be aliens mixed in with that really makes for quite a wild layer cake of reality and kayfabe. Kayfabe being the old wrestling term for fakery. Like you throw a punch and the guy pretends he got hit in the jaw. Well, it's an example of kayfabe, right? In like the WWF, we've got like kayfabe and reality, and we've got many. We got a whole bunch of strata of those things all mixed together, making it really, really hard to determine, what's real and what's not. So I think you're right, Ryan. We can assume we're being deceived here because that really seems to be the modus operandi for not just the Donald administration, but all of his predecessors also, right? The part where Pam Bondi is handing out binders supposedly that are Epstein files to some Instagram influencers, right, is an example of kayfabe or fakery, and we can be assured that everything that comes out of Washington and everything that you see in the Wall Street Journal is shot through with streaks of kayfabe, and you just never know when you're in one or not. That was my first thought too. Like, what are the chances that something actually gets revealed by the Donald administration? Right? I agree. It seems pretty slim.
I guess I wanted to just talk a second about why aliens are the last play in the playbook.
Okay, why?
Well, because what else can they do? I guess the other thing, maybe the very last play in the playbook is it's going to be something about like Jesus it is the logical conclusion is the Project Bluebeam, where they have to fake some kind of like religious awakening or something. But as you talked about, there's something about like UFOs correlate with like our paradigm shift coming or happening or something, right? Because there's something about our paradigm that's fundamentally failing to grasp our happenstance, right?
Yep. Our models are outdated, and additionally, like I would agree with what you're saying by pointing out the fact that like aliens and UFOs are just the latest mask worn by this thing, that used to be about like ascensions and descensions, and like it used to be about people coming down from the sky or people ascending to the sky or lights in the sky, things of this nature, right? Ascent and descent are classic motifs in the Christian faith. So just pointing out here that like spiritualism and virgin births, parthenogenesis, genetics, messages, like psychic abilities, magic, all these things. In the old days, in the late Roman Empire, they interpreted all these things through a religious lens, and just now with our modern society, we interpret them through like a sci-fi lens. But you're still talking about like what happens to Jesus after he returns to earth after being crucified, after his resurrection, right? He bodily floats up in the air and disappears, or John talking about the kingdom of heaven literally descending from heaven to earth. He said, I John saw the new Jerusalem, descending from the clouds, something like this. I can't quite remember how it goes. So it does seem like there's an aspect of the UFOlogy thing that's a continuation of the wheels in the sky that you can read about in Ezekiel, or any number of other strange aerial phenomenon, or the Genesis accounts of the Nephilim descending, the fallen ones coming down from the sky and breeding with humans, creating a hybrid race of angels and men, I guess, and angels and humans. I don't know. Very, very strange stuff.
Yeah. Well, we need a prophet to explain like the unexplained phenomenon that are the UFOs, and so like that is why they're intertwined, the religion and the aliens, and apparently we're in the alien disclosure phase, and so I guess it is in fact happening, is what you'd have to conclude. So hold on to your butts.
Yeah. There's a mirror image. There's like a comparison to be drawn here in like the late Roman Empire when the authorities are losing control of the narrative. Everyone's converting to Christianity en masse. The economy's in a state of collapse. The oligarchy is hoarding so much wealth that the rest of the economy can barely stay functional. And then you have this I always think about T-Mac's parable, noted ethnobotanist Terence McKenna, the late Terence McKenna. You could find hours and hours of Terence McKenna, just giving lectures on YouTube, still to this day, from back in the 80s and 90s before the man died untimely death from brain cancer. And one of his things that he likes, one of his routines was to talk about the thoroughgoing modern nature of Roman society, and that if you were at a dinner table in an upper-class Roman house, the conversation might be of democracy and atomism, right? The idea that everything's comprised of atoms. That was the new and en vogue and fashionable idea in the 2nd and 3rd centuries AD. And I'm going to try to evoke what T-Mac says now, but the Jewish people were had been enslaved, right? The conquest of Palestina, Syria had gone off in the 1st century AD, and so like the Jewish people that lived in Italy tended to be the slaves, And so, like, you would have these these people that thought very modern, that had that very modern mindset, meaning the Romans, and then their house help would be embracing like these wild, superstitious ideas about someone getting resurrected from the dead, And to do my best T-Mac impression, he's like, "Why don't these people get with the program and read a little Greek philosophy?" But that's exactly what we're seeing now. Like, you've got. It mirrors the situation, the state of play that we have in our society right now, where you've got like a sober but corrupt authority trying to keep control of the situation, and superstition and wild beliefs are threatening to break out. Disordered beliefs are threatening to break out at any time, and they're kind of like a firefighter crew having to fight brush fires. Stamping out the fire that pops up here, it pops up there. And then the other example T-Mac always has is the Holy Roman Empire. According to him, in the 13th century, the authorities when the Holy Roman Empire had that society on lockdown. Everyone was Catholic. There wasn't a lot of wild belief in magic. Not like there was the next century, once the Black Death came and went and the church was kind of exposed for having no idea what was really going on. Obviously the church was working with they were working with a wrath of God theory of disease instead of like a germ theory of disease. So no amount of praying at the Catholic churches could possibly, stem the horror of the Black Death. And people started to become suspicious of the corruption of the church. The printing press hit Europe like a bombshell in the early 1400s after it was invented by Johannes Gutenberg. And suddenly the authorities lost control of communication, much like the Roman authorities lost control of communication when the bound book was invented, to replace the scroll during the late Roman Empire. And much like the authorities are losing control of their narrative today with the internet superseding, legacy forms of media we were talking about earlier. And with all of that, the authority of the authorities collapsed, and people went from being sobered and buttoned up in the 1300s to consulting horoscopes and embracing alchemy and believing in magic. And then you had the Counter-Reformation and the Inquisition as a reaction to that. And it does seem like the authorities are losing control of the narrative once again, and that this business with the Donald announcing that we're going to release some files on the aliens must have something to do with that.
I would agree.
Yeah. And so we already mentioned Epstein, Brian, but you may I don't know if you've been making the podcast rounds this week, but Breaking Points' own Saagar Enjeti was on that Provoked podcast with Andrew Schultz. Not a podcast I usually listen to, but it's one of these aforementioned where the Donald made the rounds in 2024. And did you have a chance to listen to that one, Brian? It was pretty good.
I listened to like a bit of it.
Saagar does a great. Saagar seemed well prepared and well caffeinated for that podcast. He was going a mile a minute, having producer Griffin bring up his receipts, whether that be like a tweet or some kind of a document from the Epstein files. But I did have a short clip to play. The part that caught my eye, the part I thought was most interesting, is it's also the part that Saagar said was most interesting, and that is the connection between Epstein and the Rothschild banks of Europe. So now we propose to play for you all a brief clip, and here it is.
So in all of the Epstein files, what is the craziest email that you feel like everybody missed?
The most interesting email is this connection of the House of Rothschild to Jeffrey Epstein. And what we find in the article, as you guys can see, Ariane de Rothschild sending thousands of emails there to Jeffrey Epstein. She is at the head of this bank in Switzerland, Edmond de Rothschild. Edmond de Rothschild, at the time, was facing a lawsuit or a problem with the Department of Justice.
In America.
In America. The Department of Justice was alleging that Edmond de Rothschild, the bank in Switzerland, was helping wealthy Americans dodge taxes. So what they decide is that they'll pay a fine. Now, to negotiate that settlement, they hire two individuals, Kathy Rumler and Jeffrey Epstein. And Griffin, can you go to most interesting email just so we can see the exact text? It's my own tweet of a screenshot of their email. He says, I think he will find 45.5 penalty. That's 45.5 million. Legal, Kathy plus Pillsbury around 10 million for legal
Kathy.
fees to Kathy. Me, 25. All less than 80, pretty good. So they paid 45.5 million to the Department of Justice. Epstein was paid 25 million to broker that deal. Kathy and her team paid some $10 million. Now, by the way, the reason why this what puts it all together for me is you have the Rothschilds, this famous storied family in the history of Europe, and you have them negotiating with our Justice Department, the American Justice Department. Who do you hire? Normal people in Washington, again, I'm from Washington. I know how this works. There are 10 law firms which you hire. You don't hire Jeffrey Epstein unless you're hiring him for a reason. And when you hire him for that reason, it was to negotiate with the DOJ. Now, who's he negotiating with on behalf? What influence does he have? You have the former White House Deputy Chief of Staff to President Obama working for you. And what you do is you get that settlement knocked down. How did that happen? That's the story for me. The House of Rothschild, Jeffrey Epstein, Swiss banks.
Yeah, so that's it, Brian. That's quite a look behind the camera. First order of business, cleaning up that quote, is this. The Kathy Rummler mentioned, of course, was former White House Chief of Staff or Deputy Chief of Staff under Obama. Anyway, because of these leaks, she had to step down from her job as the general counsel over at Goldman Sachs this week. The Wall Street Journal headline is Goldman Sachs top lawyer to step down following latest Epstein documents. The subheadline reads, Bank had been steadfast in its support of Catherine Rummler. Recent documents showed she was a close ally of Epstein's through his 2019 arrest. So so it means a few dominoes starting to fall here stateside. There haven't been many, but yeah. So the House of Rothschild, right? What's the story with the House of Rothschild? Well, this is the bank founded by Mayor Amschel Rothschild in Frankfurt. And the story goes that his descendants fanned out across Europe and began establishing major banks and were instrumental in establishing the central banks in many European countries. And the famous story about Nathan Rothschild, who's the grandson of Mayor Amschel Rothschild, I do believe. Nathan Rothschild did a move in 1815 or 16, whenever Napoleon's defeat at Waterloo was, and the story goes that Nathan Rothschild received news of the Duke of Wellington's defeat of Napoleon prior to the general public, and that a rumor had been spread, possibly by him, possibly by someone else, that actually the Duke of Wellington had lost and Napoleon was emerging victorious, creating a broad sell-off on the London Stock Exchange. But behind the scenes, Nathan Rothschild bought up all those stocks for pennies on the dollar, only for the news to break that no, in fact, Napoleon actually had been defeated, and sending the stock market to new highs, and meaning that the Rothschilds owned huge chunks, major swaths of the British economy. The Balfour Declaration is the idea that there ought to be a Jewish state after World War I. That Balfour Declaration was written by Lord Balfour, the foreign minister or what have you in the UK, to one of the Rothschilds. It was the House of Rothschild who selected the Star of David for the Israeli flag. They were integral in the establishment of the State of Israel. Also, the House of Rothschild is the occasion for many anti-Semitic myths. Hopefully, I haven't repeated any just now. But for those people who want to villainize entire swaths of Jewish people at once, the Rothschilds are often Exhibit A. You used to justify that kind of stereotyping. But there is no doubt that the Rothschilds are a major financial influence over Europe. And that, and here you find Epstein and Kathy Rummler negotiating for a Rothschild bank in Switzerland to get a major discount on the fine it would have to pay for not disclosing the financial information of its clients and shielding them from prosecution and taxation by the U.S. government. That's really quite a penetrating insight into the way that international geopolitics work. And the last crumb I'll add to this cake here is that, you really can see that there is a structure of power that supersedes the nation state that we have lived in since 1649, and that this must have something to do with the reason that the United States has to just give money to Israel and support them in their foreign wars, no matter how disastrous such policies might be here domestically for U.S. politicians. They still are compelled look, we are rattling the saber with respect to Iran, and everyone knows that this the military action against Iran is not something that benefits the United States so much. It's something that it's on the wish list. It's one of the objectives of the Netanyahu administration over there in Israel. Quite a lot going on there with Saagar reading us some interesting details that show us just how international banking and fixers like Jeffrey Epstein interact with our own U.S. government and other world governments.
Well, I guess that it sort of confirms what I think any thinking person probably suspected, but I guess saying that sort of thing previously would probably make you to be considered some kind of anti-Semite.
That's usually what you get called if you criticize the Israeli government. But yes, you're right. It would seem like an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory, except for now we've got the receipts.
Yeah, I mean, and so like, why is it that, why is it that when you criticize the Israeli government, you get branded as an anti-Semite? I mean, is it because you're actually anti-Semitic, or is it because Israel has to like play this political offense so that they can execute what they're trying to do? Yeah. And it's just overwhelmingly apparent what the score is at this point. So Kathy Limler, or whatever her name was, she just got fired on Friday. Is that the case?
On Thursday. It was this week. The headline is February 12th. It's February 22nd, so I guess it was 10 days ago. So it was it was last week, not this week.
I see. That's like a crazily shocking development. I guess it's kind of surprising that it hasn't been talked about more, but on the other hand, it's kind of not surprising because that's just the kind of narrative that, thanks to Israel's political offense, doesn't get talked about on our media. But God bless Saagar for going on Andrew Schultz's podcast and spreading the good word. I think a lot of people do listen to Breaking Points, and even though Crystal Ball drives me crazy sometimes, it's really a great news show that is an accessible format for millennials and younger people like ourselves.
It looks like the old news. I feel like anyone could get on board with Breaking Points. But one last note on the anti-Semitism, right? I do feel like whatever it is that explains all of the anti-Semitic comments that are on every Twitter post now. I mean, there's a version where saying something anti-Semitic is the best way to get attention. You know, it's like the middle school kid scratching a swastika onto the swing set at his local school, right? The kid is not actually there's like a power to once kids find out that there's like a power to saying certain things, that you can get a reaction from public officials by doing certain things like scratching that swastika into your swing set. They're going to do it just for the attention. And then there's actual anti-Semites who act for whatever reason are suspicious of Jewish people, broadly speaking, which there's going to be no helping such people. But then there's the other layer to this cake where when the Israeli government does a genocide and does it while cloaking themselves in a costume, saying that no, there is no difference, there's no daylight between the Israeli government and Judaism, generally speaking, right? They're doing this genocide while waving the flag of, cloaking themselves in the flag of Jewry. It's like, well, that is going to cause people to migrate into the anti-Semitism camp that otherwise wouldn't. When you insist that the genocide is being perpetrated by Jews and not just by the Israeli government, well, then you're going to create the anti-Semitism you claim to be so worried about. So, I mean, that factor has got to be, that phenomenon has got to be factored in also, eh?
I'm sure that someone, maybe like Netanyahu or some kind of, representative of the Israeli government is gonna, come on, Joe Rogan or Tucker Carlson and have a slow, calm discussion where they rationally entertain the criticisms of, Tucker or someone, or, like a reasonable, someone to address the things that people are worried about. And, maybe could be confronted with this information about Kathy and the Rothschild Bank and tie it all together with Lord Balfour there. They'll have a reasoned conversation without any accusations of anti-Semitism. Yeah. I'm sure that kind of thing will be coming soon. to kind of calm the discourse.
Coming soon to a podcast player near you. And I'm sure they would just execute BB if he actually went out and actually did the. I know you're making a joke, but like if he actually went out and actually tried to rationally engage with the genocide going on within his over there in Israel, like I'm sure that would be the end for him. He's got a. I'm sure there are things he can say and things he definitely cannot say, or his life would be in danger. I believe that the structures of power that exist, above the level of the nation state, I think are really robust, really powerful.
Well, did you hear about Tucker Carlson's trip to Israel?
Oh yeah, I did hear about that. Yeah. So what's the story with that, Brian?
Well, Tucker Carlson's versions of events is that. Well, he went to Israel it's the U.S. ambassador to Israel is Mike Huckabee. And, he was the only person who was willing to have that kind of conversation. The kind of conversation before where Tucker can just ask his questions and get a reasonable response to some extent anyway. How the interview went is... it's kind of a frustrating interview to listen to, as it seems like that Mike Huckabee is obviously running cover for the Israeli government rather than the United States government. But sort of like the lines of inquiry went like he would ask Mike Huckabee if any other state had is there any other country or people who have like a divine biblical or like political right to their land in the same way that the Jews in Israel do, and Mike Huckabee would refuse to answer that question. He would dance around it, and then there's this whole thing where Tucker was recounting the tale of going out there, and there was some intrigue after the fact where his producers were detained and questioned by the Israeli government when they were trying to leave, not when they're entering. But Tucker said that he had reached out to the U.S. Embassy to request, because the original plan wasn't to do the interview at the airport, but at the embassy, and he had requested they send out a representative to escort them to the embassy, which I guess is a normal request, is what Tucker says, and they were unwilling to assist. And then they got interrogated by the Israeli government when they were trying to leave. And so it seems like the U.S. Embassy is really trying to provide cover for Israel, which I guess is like what you would expect, right? Based on that email from Kathy there. If to the extent that, these Rothschild banks in Israel are sort of synonymous, those Zionist political interests, which obviously don't apply to every Jew.
We talked about this last week, but you know how you go to the grocery store and, there's 50 different brands of cereal, but really there's only really two companies that make cereal, maybe it's Post or General Mills. And there's really only 6 conglomerates that make the bevy of brands on offer in American grocery stores, right? There's really only 6 conglomerates that make all those brands, right? It creates an illusion of choice, a dizzying array of selection, but really it's all an illusion, and you really just have a choice between 1 or 2 or 3 major conglomerates depending on the product you're trying to buy. And it's just the same way with the nation states, right? They wear all these masks of different countries, but really it's the same power structure once you tear away the mask. And the way that the U.S. Embassy sandbagged Tucker Carlson and his crew really shows that reality. That it's whether you're talking about Israeli authorities or American authorities, you're actually just talking to the same single authority existing behind the scenes, behind the operator, behind the veil of Oz, so to speak. So yeah, man, that definitely seems like what's going on here. Very conspiratorial.
Yeah, that's I guess what the email from Kathy really indicates is, it's just the same interests sorting out their actions, and I don't know. I guess people are. Those interests want to brand you an anti-Semite for pointing that out, I guess. But I guess I don't see how that makes you anti-Semitic.
Obviously, it does not. They're just destroying the anti-Semite label and making it worthless.
I mean, if someone, wants to come on the podcast and have a discussion about why we're anti-Semites, I guess I would love to engage in that kind of discussion.
There's no way that anyone could think either of us anti-Semites just for noticing, for reading these Epstein emails and being, oh, okay, I guess the Rothschild's bank gets themselves a special deal. It's like,
well, okay, but that is just the kind of thing that does get you branded as an anti-Semite, though, right?
Well, yes. But no, there wouldn't be an argument. There wouldn't be a rationale behind it, right? It's like calling someone an anti-Semite for reading a Jeffrey Epstein email would be like, there wouldn't be any logic that you could possibly argue with, right? It would just be, well, sorry, dude, it's just right here in the emails.
Well, I guess I would think what they'd have to argue is that, they'd have to argue that you hate the Jews, and therefore you're anti-Semitic.
Do you remember a couple of years in the direct aftermath of the October 7th attacks, Brett Weinstein and Heather were on their podcast, and they were playing the final cut, and Roger Waters of Pink Floyd, a man who has been tarred with the anti-Semitic label for like decades now, just because he dares to have empathy for the Palestinian plight. But they played his music, and they had a nice weep on. And then they were like, yeah, but I think Roger probably does have some hate in his heart. And that was the end of the podcast. Yeah, I'm sure they would not say that today, and that they were just in an emotional state following the October 7th attacks. But man, it's just like what you're talking about. What do you mean? What? Yeah, there's just it's impossible to see how anyone could come to that conclusion. It's just that the current version of America, our current mythology is the World War II mythology, where anti-Semitism is the worst possible thing. It's adjacent to Nazism, and that is un-American, just flagrantly un-American. And so that's what because the anti-Semitic insult or label has such power, that's why it's being hurled around. But of course, it's being deflated and denuded of all of its power by being used against people like Roger Waters, who are obviously not anti-Semitic at all, but who have criticized the Israeli government.
Yeah, well, that's like the really amazing thing about October 7th is that I have enough faith that Brett Weinstein would relinquish his opinion if asked about it, that Roger's full of hate or has some hate in his heart.
Not his finest hour on the podcast.
And like October 7th has just changed the zeitgeist in that way, and that now no one can harbor those kind of delusions. And so it's a pretty good shift, I would say.
Well, last item on the Rothschild email here. Obviously, the concept of the nation state congealed or solidified in 1649 with the Treaty of Westphalia, which concluded the 30 Years' War. And the 30 Years' War was the culmination of the Protestant Reformation. It was a conflict between Protestantism and Catholicism, and the Protestants won that war. And as a result, the Pope was the idea of establishing and drawing international borders across Europe, and indeed across the entire world, was that you were going to establish these boundaries that agents of the Pope were not supposed to cross. In other words, polities like Bohemia would be allowed to be Protestant if they chose to be Protestant, and that the Pope was not supposed to try to influence that choice at all. And so it was really the Treaty of Westphalia was really a curtailment of the Pope's political power. Whereas previously the Pope had been the person who crowned the heads of Christendom. Now there was a power vacuum atop the geopolitical hierarchy of Europe. And who should fill that power vacuum? None other than the central banks the first surviving central bank. Stockholm had one a little bit before this, but the Bank of England, less than 50 years after the Treaty of Westphalia, arises in London. A consortium of London and Edinburgh merchants agreed to give the king a whole chunk of money for the right to get the king's tax receipts in the future and the right to issue paper currency against those tax receipts. And boom, you have the world's first central bank. I think that the banking houses are the real power behind the throne, and that this Rothschild email to Jeffrey Epstein clearly illustrates the way that power is brokered above the nation-state level. So I just wanted to work that little bit in about the old 30 Years' War of the early 1600s. So, yeah.
Man, I wonder what they're like talking about on the Daily Wire these days. Do you think they'll be covering this email between Limler and...
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be number one on their list of topics to get into.
That would just be fascinating. But yep.
Well, moving on here, Brian. Well, moving on a little bit. Our dear friend, Mr. Zoran Mamdani, of course, took power in January down there in New York City. And his predecessors left Mr. Mamdani with a catastrophic budget shortfall. And Mamdani is talking about jacking up tax rates on the wealthy in order to plug the hole in the budget, right? Cover that budget shortfall. And so as a result of all of this talk of raising taxes on the wealthy, a subject near and dear to my heart, Mr. Dave Portnoy of the Barstool Sports, El Presidente, tweeted up the following, which I thought was interesting. I think I have a solution for Mamdani, tweets Portnoy. Tax Wall Street people like Steve Cohen, who built their fortunes just on Wall Street, 90%. That's not real work to begin with. I thought that was very funny. Obviously, Steve Cohen is one of these super rich hedge funds traders. He owns the New York Mets, was what I most know Mr. Cohen from. I mean, yeah, how about that? Dave Portnoy, he's like stumbling into economics that are about as sophisticated as the late 1700s. That's where he's at. This is the program called for by the proto-capitalists, your John Stuart Mills, your David Ricardos, your Adam Smiths, right? The idea that you hammer the wealthy with taxes because otherwise they're going to they're going to use their savings to jack up rents on the workers, and that's bad for the capitalists, the factory owners, right? So that this led the early capitalist thinkers like Adam Smith to make a distinction between earned income, through actually created through the provision of goods and services on the one hand, and unearned income, which was the old medieval landlords who were still able to help themselves to the profits of the factory owners by jacking up rents on their workers. Obviously, the factory owners have got to pay the workers whatever their landlords demand because their workers need a place to live. Otherwise, they can't be reliable workers. And so it's interesting to see Dave Portnoy making it all the way to 1776, the year that Adam Smith published Wealth of Nations, with his economic sophistication here.
Yeah, well, Dave Portnoy, if anyone doesn't know, he's a famed Boston sports diehard fanatic, and he runs the Barstool Sports. And he's kind of built an empire on that, and he's gone from being a sort of a blue collar dude to being fantastically rich, and he's doing like a Davey day trader thing on Twitter and whatnot. And so I know, he is into sports gambling, but he's also into stocks and whatnot, kind of relatedly. And Dave Portnoy is a fellow who, let's see, there was kind of an incident where he got mad at an employee. They were like making jokes about I can't remember exactly what it was, but Dave Portnoy was essentially accusing him of being an anti-Semite, not unlike Brett and Heather Weinstein and Roger Waters. But I think that the jokes the person was making were probably had more truth in them than is not like really a hateful thing. But I can't remember the exact situation, but that's my recollection.
So you're thinking the Barstool employee was leveraging some kind of criticism of the Israeli government and not making some generalization about Jewish people in broadly speaking.
It was something like that. It would be better if I could remember the exact situation. Anyway, it wasn't in my estimation, my vague recollection, it wasn't the best look for Dave Portnoy. And then Dave Portnoy's been accused of being, I don't know, because he does these one bite pizza reviews. In light of the Epstein files, people were trying to harass him and trying to say that he's in on Pizzagate or something. But on the whole, I think that Dave Portnoy is overall a well-intentioned dude. He's also had some other political scandals where these they've tried to come at him and question his, they've used his relationship with women. I guess they've made some rape allegations against him or something. Anyway, on the whole, I'm excited that he's embracing 90% tax rates on the Wall Street. And he's kind of a popular fellow amongst a certain, beer drinking, football watching crowd, right? And so to pass Marxist ideas onto that crowd, I think is pretty exciting.
I would say that taxing unearned income, it's not even a Marxist idea. Maybe Marxism grew out of early capitalism, but it's a capitalist idea through and through, right? It's not till the Austrian school and libertarian economics come around in the late 1800s that you get this erasing of the difference between earned and unearned income, right? And so still today, like, we don't really think, we count our GDP as if it's some kind of a measure of economic productivity, but like when your credit card company jacks up the rates on your credit card, from 15% to 30%, right? That just counts as earned income in the GDP. Like, that just looks like more economic productivity, but it's really not productivity at all. It's just parasitism, right? You're not being any more productive from a goods and services perspective by jacking up someone's credit card interest rate. You're just extracting more wealth from them because you have the power to, you have the cudgel to. It's just like jacking up the rate of jacking up the toll booth, the rate of the toll booth, right? Well, doesn't make the highway any more efficient, right? It just makes the highway more expensive. And so that's just the kind of thing, that kind of activity, rentier activity, right? According to the early capitalists, you have to hammer that kind of activity with taxes to disincentivize it, right? Because obviously, what's the old proviso? If you want more of something, if you want less of something, tax it more, and if you want more of something, tax it less. And so that's why, that makes perfect sense to me, and that's why I think that people who actually provide goods and services, we should abolish taxes on people like that. But folks who want to make money with property rather than work, right? They want to set up a toll booth on their apartment or their house and rent it to someone else, or they're loaning out money via credit cards. Whatever the rentier activity is, you got to hammer that activity with taxes to get less of it, right? If you abolish taxes on working people, you'll get more people working, right? And if you jack up taxes on rentiers, you'll get fewer rentiers, is the thinking. Now, I would go a step further. Now, this might be where you'd get into what people would classically call socialism, but you just extend that logic and say, well, not only should we not tax workers, but we'd ought to subsidize work too. We can provide things like housing and healthcare by leveraging economies of scale. We can provide those things without profit at cost to huge tracts of the workforce, making it much, much easier for small business owners to set up small businesses. This is exactly this is what's great about Singapore, right? Singapore has actually cracked books on capitalism, and they run their economy in this way. Most people in Singapore can afford to have an au pair come and take care of their kids, because the young couples can afford to pay the au pair, because the au pair is going to be some older woman whose children have already grown up and left the nest. But this woman is going to have her health care taken care of for her, and she's going to be living in a government subsidized apartment. And so she doesn't, you don't need, they have no minimum wage in Singapore, right? Because everyone has their basic needs already taken care of, in just the way that I'm talking about, by the state, by subsidizing work versus punishing it with taxes. Old Dave Portnoy, he does seem to be, his train is pulling into the 1776 station with this suggestion. And, just another note on the idea of taxing the wealthy. The aforementioned libertarians, just think about taxes as evil, but it's an important tool to have in your toolbox as a community, because you can have people with too much wealth, right? What happens when people start to accumulate too much wealth? Well, you cannot consume. Once you start to get into billions of dollars, right? There's really not much more you can consume. There's only so many lobsters and caviar that you can eat in a given day. What people tend to do with excess money, right, is not consume more once you get to that level. What they tend to buy more assets that yield some kind of an income, right? They're going to buy more assets, and that's going to drive up asset prices. And that's why the fact that we're not taxing our wealthy enough since the 1980s, let's say, we started taxing our wealthy in America during the New Deal, during the 1930s, experienced a golden age, and then started to roll back those taxes as the wealthy, the wealthy rentiers in America got their revenge in the 80s with the Reagan administration. What happens when you don't sop up the excess money pooling in the sectors of the economy where there's excess money? Well, those people are going to buy assets and bid up asset prices, and you see everything from homes to stocks to classic automobiles, cars, artwork, things like this. The price just goes up and up and up. And it's making the economy unlivable for almost everyone else. These are the prophecies of doom of the proto-capitalists, was that, if you fail to tax the rentiers, then they will end up cannibalizing your entire economy by simply buying up all the assets available. And so, welcome to the show, Mr. Portnoy. I would say it's really interesting to see despite the best efforts of our, the old legacy media, awareness that something isn't quite right in America, awareness that a tiny number of us, a narrow slice of our population, a tiny oligarchy, is eating everyone's lunch, and the country is just getting worse and worse and worse. And people are trying to vote for Bernie Sanders or Donald Trump as an escape hatch to this worsening situation. And so far, establishment politics has managed to hold, to keep history dammed up and prevent any progress, on making a more just or equitable society in the way that we did during the 30s with the New Deal. But whispers are starting to come from, certain corners of society, like this podcast and like Mr. Dave Portnoy, that it's time to get back to soaking the rich like they did during the 1930s. It's just economically helpful.
Yeah. All right. Exciting stuff, eh?
Yeah. Well, alrighty, folks, that's about it for this exciting episode of the System Failure Podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. If you did, consider paying us a little visit over at systemfailure.org. At systemfailure.org, you can get in contact with either Brian or myself and let us know whether you think we're anti-Semites. You can accomplish that on the About page. Also at systemfailure.org, you can sign up to receive the weekly System Failure essays each and every Sunday morning right there in your email inbox. I think you'll love them. And that's about it. So yeah, everyone, have a fantastic week. When next we speak, I'll be coming to you from Europe. Brian will be here in the state of Maine holding down the fort. So we will be remote, but we can't wait to talk to you then.
All right, see you.